So what I'm thinking is open communication. So it's like really create a safe space for people where they can share ideas. And this is really critical to build a trusting and engaging workplace, right? So because engaging in conversation with the leaders and managers in the company, it's really allow you to be understanding why we do what we do, because they create a common understanding and alignment.
This is the Snowball Effect. You're listening to the Marketing Playbook series, presented by the Snowball Effect podcast. It's growth done right.
Hey, this is Todd, and welcome to the Snowball Effect. We're really excited today because we have Jing Tian, and she's here from Tigo Energy. Welcome to the podcast, Jing.
Hi, Todd. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Well, it's so good to have you. And Jing is the Chief Growth Officer at Tigo Energy. And before we get into Tigo Energy and before we get into picking your brain about all kinds of questions that I have for you, I want to get to know you a little bit. So tell us something a little bit interesting about yourself.
Okay, so I can tell you about it. I actually was trained as a chemist. So growing up, I envisioned myself as a scientist, donning on the crisp white lab coat, immerse myself in cutting edge polymer science research within the realm of electronics and optics. So I never imagined myself. The path took me to where I am today.
So you have a scientific background. So give me a couple of highlights about what brought you here.
Yeah, sure. I'll tell you my journey. So after I earned my PhD degree, I took a research scientist job at a company here in Silicon Valley. It's like everyone else, you get excited about adventure of a startup world. And so I took a plunge, founded a company with a very big ambition that is to build a business based on the nonlinear optical material. So that experience was a whirlwind experience to learn all things very quickly beyond engineer. So that's where I developed into the other aspects of running a business. So yeah, so the typical traditional chemistry, but polymer science is specifically really focused on organic materials. So we so-called make a better living by chemistry. You have nylons, plastics. These all belongs to the polymer materials.
That's fantastic. And I know that you've taken that big brain of yours and applied it in the solar industry. I think you've been in the solar industry for over a decade. Is that about right?
Yes, yes.
Oh, that's great. We work with a lot of solar installers. And so I'm really excited to pick your brain today. So I've been following you on LinkedIn and just watching some of the things you post and just learning a little bit about you. And you mentioned something on there that I really resonated with, and it was about creating a culture of success. So tell me a little bit more about that. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, what I mean creating culture of success, it's really meaning you fostering an environment where employee not only contributing to the success of the company, but they also feel empowered, thrive, can grow. Right. So essentially, is an environment where they really love it, they will stick with it and have an opportunity to grow on their personal and professional level.
Following up on that, Jing, let me ask you a little bit. What's the most vital part of creating this culture that you talk about?
Yeah, so before I jump into perhaps I share with you my experience. One of the story, which perhaps we can relate back to the some of the vital elements of that. So a few years ago, actually quite a few years ago, I climbed the Mount Shasta with a group of coworkers. So mind you, some of you don't live in California may not know. Mount Shasta is one of the probably third highest mountain in California. A summit at 14,000, I believe is 14,180 feet. But what is different from some other mountains in California is it requiring technical mountaineering skills. So I'll tell you this group. So with 12 of us, 10 of us had no prior experience at all, right? So with the two leaders who had a lot of experience, they were the group leaders. So to prepare for the trip, so we had studying to a physical training to make sure we're physically ready, and also learn about crampon, ice axes, and also mountaineering lingos and plot out route. So what this activity do is we are loosely group to us to form a group that we feel very comfortable, that we get to know each other, and then we have a very engaging. We can share with each other. Right. So then a month later, we set out our trip and started our ascent in the midnight. We picked the full moon day, so it's a lot of lights. So it was a full moon and it's beautiful. The snow reflected on the ice. Just picture that. It's almost like a day hike. So we approached the top after pretty hard climbing. I don't remember exactly, probably about 6, 7 hours. And then suddenly weather changed. So then we could either choose to continue on, which is dangerous because you couldn't really see what's in front of you, and or you just turn back. But luckily, our leaders was very experienced. They had a lot of experience. They look at the weather. They say, "Well, I think this is going to pass in about 30 minutes." So we waited it out. Luckily, it was true. So we were able to continue our mission, reach the top. So after all those hard works, then you standing on top of the summit. It was an exhilarating feeling. But you know what? I remember the most of the story. I kept talking about it. It was the journey to reach the top. So we all returned with a very, very profound sense of accomplishment. You know, when I look at the Mount Shasta again, I never have the same feeling again. It was just like have affiliation with this mountain. It was really changing a lot of my perspective. So each year there are thousands of people try to attempting this mountain. But the statistic is roughly about 25 to 30% people reach the top.
Really? Out of all those people, only a fourth of them or less actually reach the top.
Yeah, so like I think due to various reasons, ties into preparation, the teams, how we do together. So what I learned from this experience was it's our success was not pure luck. Because I think it's to do with the several things how made us as a team feel we can do. Those are four things we did. So it was open communication. We can rely on each other, and we have a growth mindset because 10 of us had no experience, right? To begin with, people said, we're not even take you, right? So it's a growth mindset and the coaching and mentoring with the people who with the experience. And lastly, to embrace the change. So with all of this, that's really prepared us to the top of the mountains. So what I draw the story is I think that's what I want to share with you about how those four elements actually is really applicable in creating a culture of success. So what I'm thinking is open communication. So it's like really create a safe space for people where they can share ideas. And this is really critical to build a trusting and engaging workplace, right? So because engaging in conversation with the leaders, managers in the company, it's really allow you to be understanding why we do what we do, because they create a common understanding and alignment. So when people feel that their idea is being heard, I think this is a very strong, create a very strong sense of belonging. We don't have to share a tent in order to get to know each other. No way.
I love that so much. So how long did that entire journey take?
The journey is about you typically you're planning for 3 days trip because in the Bay Area we drove to this in Northern California, took us there to the trailhead and then prepare acclimate to elevation. So the challenge is as specified 14,000 and plus elevation is typically people get an altitude sickness at about 10,000 feet. So you really get yourself get ready, then prepare. And then also the climbing itself is on the snow. So usually you also want to start the summit in the midnight. So you rest during the day, you try as much as you can, and then you start the summit during the in the midnight. Then when you reach the top, oftentimes it was sunrise. So it's like really beautiful.
That sounds amazing. And for our audience, if you haven't ever done this, go onto Google and look up Mount Shasta at night and look at some of those 4K images that come up. And you'll get just a little bit of a visual of what Jing's talking about here. I've never been up there, but I've experienced it through Google Images, and it's simply amazing. I love those. I love those principles that you talk about. Let me just revisit those quickly, just to make sure I understand. You talked about open communication. You talked about a growth mindset.
Mhm.
Remind me of the other two.
And coach and the mentoring, and also embrace the changes.
I love that. So the coaching, the mentoring, and then be ready to embrace change. Sometimes we think of culture as, hey, let's do lunch on Fridays or something like that. But a culture of success is so much more, right? It's a mindset as well as some of these habits of communication and mentoring and being able to adjust. You've got a really good background, like I said, from all your brainiac stuff to your marketing things, but you've been in the solar industry for over a decade, and you've had to make some tough decisions, some complex decisions. So walk me through how you do that.
Every day we make decisions, right? So before I get into the complex decision, let's distinguish the simple decision versus complex decision. So you just mentioned about lunch, like where do we want to go lunch and what clothes I'm going to wear this morning. That is a simple decision because it doesn't have significant consequences, or it's just they don't involve ambiguity. Right? It's just so complex decision in contracts oftentimes contains ambiguity as a multi-factor, and usually I say there's no single right answer. But those decisions oftentimes carries a significant impact in our life, such as buying a house and or choose a college to attend. So what I view is how to make this is usually you got to stick with that decision making process. So for example, if you receive a very, very exciting job, but it's out of the city, so what do? Right, so here's the process, I would say. First, identify what is your key decision making criteria, or I say factors, right? So, what's important to you, such as a career advancement, a family consideration, lifestyles, right? And then, cost of living, perhaps it's also financial situation. You want to take that into account. So, first you establish a criteria. Now, second, what you do is you gather the information. So you understand the job market, the cost of living, and the local amenity, because that's going to impact your lifestyle. Then third one is obviously consulting people around you, your partners, your family, because their perspective have pretty big impact on how the decision. They just share with you their perspective. Perhaps will shape your way of thinking. Then what I say is the next one that will be you really going to analyze the option, pros and cons, weighing all this, how's it ultimately align with your long-term goal. And then most of you is in this case will ask for a trial period. Can I go visit the city, get some first-hand information? So once you have all those points, then you said I'm ready to make a decision, right? But that's not the end. Oftentimes, a robust decision making process, you got to come back and reflect. Say, now I made a decision. Now I'm reflecting this decision. How well it's doing? Should I make some adjustment? So what I see, this process is equally applicable. It's mirror into our business decision making process. Oftentimes, as I mentioned earlier, there's no right or wrong decision. You got to rely on your colleagues, and they can give you perspective, but also don't be afraid to make decisions. Because a robust decision process allow you to course corrections, reflect, and make adjustments as needed.
I really resonate with that. In fact, I watched a member of my team just move from California up to Oregon. And it's so interesting. In each one of our weekly one on ones, I saw her intentionally going through that process. They were trying to decide a place for her husband to get his master's degree. And then where should that be? And then once they had selected the school, but taking in those factors very intentionally. And I think in business, in marketing, I think so often we end up going off of our gut, or we feel this urgency that we've got to make a decision right away. And it's such a nice thing to stand back and just intentionally just bullet out those things that Jing just said there. which is embrace that ambiguity and then identify your criteria, gather information, talk to other people, and reflect back on that and iterate. I just love that framework. I think that will create a nice series of decision making habits for executives and leaders. Anything else you would add there to the decision making process as we talk through it together?
No, I think this is the process I usually use, whether intentionally in personal life, sometimes it just become very natural, you practice. In the business world, clearly we need to stay with the process. But yeah.
I love that. Well, let's take a second now. We've got complex decisions to make every day, but now let's look down the road a little bit. And
Mhm.
I want to leverage your experience in the solar industry and really arm our audience. We have a lot of people in the solar industry, solar installers. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for solar growth in the next few years?
Overall, you think about the penetration of the solar is still relatively low, right? So we still have a lot of room to grow. But what I see is, I think it's the virtual power plant that's what really going to propel the growth, right? Solar plus storage, then it's really going to shifting the traditional power plant into a distributed generation resources. So you can, I think, an audience, most of people know what virtual power plant is, but just imagine if you can build your solar rooftop with the storage, then or your entire neighborhood with that capability. Then somehow magically all those systems are virtually stitched together. Guess what? You can provide the energy need for the community. But those are really powered by a lot of innovative solutions and also with a lot of software invention in there to make this a reality. So that's where I see the future of this energy transformation.
That's great. So these virtual solar power plants and then the software to manage that. How does somebody prepare for that? Do they start exploring these types of tools and these options? How does somebody actually prepare for the future that you just laid out?
Yeah, I think that what's going to change is obviously depends on which area of technology. If you're an installer, so like there's a lot of growth, right? Continue to install solar and the battery, know about this, how best to install this. Like if you're a technologist and then you're obviously looking at the technology, whether it's battery solutions or other storage solution. But I think the reality of virtual power plants rely heavily on software. So like how do we change the entire control the grid from centralized to change it into a distributed? I think that's a tremendous amount of invention yet to be realized.
That's going to be really exciting to watch that emerge, this distributed control there. Now, I want to ask you about your personal journey a little bit. You gave us some highlights earlier, but I want to ask you about some of the lessons, the personal lessons that you've learned that you think are relevant for entrepreneurs and business leaders. What would you share?
There's a lot of different ones, but I wanted to share something that are core to me. Do you ever have a moment that there's a project, ideas that are you so excited you couldn't stop thinking about it? All right, because I can't wait to jump back to it. I would say cherish those moments, enjoy the ride. So what's translated into career is you always seek and looking for these environments that allow you to thrive in those moments. Right? It's really create as many inspiring moments as possible. And secondly is I think it's really important is surrounding yourself with the people who are going to cheer you on and support you along the way. As I mentioned, the growth mindset never going to tell you you can't do it. So like, they will be there to cheer you on. And in return, you will lend a hand to other people who come after you, right? So I think together we'll create a much better world. But lastly, I think it's really important to celebrate yourself, celebrate your achievement. Um, yeah.
I love that. You say a few things in there that I really love. One is these moments, right? These moments of joy or where you flow state or you feel like things are clicking, right? Those are sometimes rare, but when you get those, enjoy those, chase those. And I love that. And then you talk about the people. and then celebrating your wins. On our team, I make them do a funny thing where they have a victory folder. And anytime anything that they've created in marketing or communication that they've distributed, where maybe they got some praise for that, or they just feel really good that this was impactful, then capture that, take a screenshot of it and dump it into this victory folder. It can sure get us through some bad weeks, right? When we celebrate those wins that we have. I think that,
I'm going to borrow your ideas, the victory folder. That sounds really good.
yeah, it's a little bit of a cheesy name, but it's something that I make them do only because I love looking back at those personal wins, right? Of like, hey,
Yes,
it really helps with that
I
nagging,
remember.
yeah,
Yeah,
that
I
nagging
like it.
imposter syndrome that we get.
Absolutely. I had my previous job, that was probably 10 years ago. We had this most unforgettable victory moment. We still talk about it today.
That's
And
awesome.
also, I think it has a profound impact, a lasting impact in our career. I think it's really cherished those moments. Yeah.
I really love that. I was just reading the other day that this was something about relationships, but I think it relates to your point here, where they said one of the signs of a healthy relationship, it can be with a partner or with a spouse, are those couples that will reminisce on the good old days. That reminiscing recreates that and rekindles those early feelings. And I think us in the business world, I think we can learn from that to reminisce on those wins and those good memories. And I think it really helps us get through some of those boring times or some of those tough times. This has been really, really helpful. And I appreciate you sharing professional advice, personal advice, future looking advice. I really appreciate that. If people want to keep this conversation going, they want to reach out to you, they want to find out about Tigo Energy, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, sure. So maybe a couple words about Tigo Energy. Tigo Energy is a leading provider of solar and energy storage solution with global presence. We have deployed our product in 7 continents since 2017. So our offering including module level power electronics and energy storage solution and the software, energy intelligence software. So for more information, you should visit our website. That's tigoenergy.com. Tigo energy.com. You can probably find me or you can check me out on the LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from you.
I love that. And go in to the About Us section on Tigo Energy and look at the leadership profiles, and you'll read about all the cool things that my guest Jing has done. Thank you so much for joining the Snowball Effect podcast today. This has been a really, really fun conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. It's been my pleasure. So thank you.
To our audience, thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you next time on the Snowball Effect.